Hi, this is Mike Spivey with the Spivey Consulting Group, and I wanted to do a podcast on something that's starting to come up more and more this time of year. It's November, late November. It's, by my estimation of all the years I've done this, actually the hardest part of the admissions process, which is, and everyone is about to be able to relate to this, you've submitted your applications and now you're waiting. So the waiting is the hardest part, and it does things to people that it causes insecurities and feelings they've never felt before, and I'll get into that. It also causes, at times, damaging actions by the applicants, particularly when an applicant reaches out to a school for no other reason other than to feel better about themselves. And I'll get into that too. But let me first explain why you're having to wait. Okay, so, unless you applied early decision, just about everyone is waiting on a school or schools. Even the high scores, the high GPA, high LSAT, they have a stretch school too. We like to say that, just based on the data alone, Yale is a stretch for everyone. And traditionally, although that might be changing, Yale hasn't made decisions until early as January. Point being, almost every applicant other than ED applicants in the last 20 plus years that I've been doing this could relate to this podcast. The reason why you're waiting are a couple. One is admissions officers travel a good deal. They travel September, October, November. And then there's also sort of one-off trips throughout the rest of the application cycle. They travel to forums, LSAC-sponsored forums, to individual schools in caravans, and they travel to interview. So when they're traveling, they're not in the office. Some read applications on a plane. Some, like I used to do, read them at home on weekends. But the travel itself invariably slows down the process. So the process is slow September, October, November because admissions officers are meeting with students at forums and fairs. Number two, they're waiting on data. That's you, by the way. But they're waiting on lots of data. It's hard to make admissions decisions without a clear idea of what's going to happen in the cycle. All you have in admissions is historic data. And then as the cycle progresses, and you've seen us blog about the data, you start getting the LSAC reports, the volume reports, but they're not very useful early on, only because the power of them is less pronounced. In November, they say things like, as of last year, we had 10% of our applicant pool, 15% of our applicant pool. So what is that when you're in admissions is that you're still waiting on 85% of your applicants. And until you have a sort of critical mass, you don't know if the cycle is going to be up or down. So you don't know how to titrate your goals, GPA, LSAT, diversity, gender, anything, any kind of goals, because you don't have a good picture of the applicant pool. So you're waiting on data, you're traveling. Let's talk about now December, when you have a critical mass of data and you're not on the road. There's a huge myth about rolling admissions. Admissions decisions are almost categorically not made on date completed, which is why I get almost frustrated when I see applicants rushing to get their applications in September when they could have submitted a much better application October. That makes no difference on when it's going to be read. You're read in groups based on the needs of the school. And stated another way, you're read in groups based on the strength of the applicant. If the applicant has a 175 and a 3.9, and I hate to say it, but it's true, so it's good for you to know, and they applied in December, they are much more likely to be read than if you have a 163 and a 3.5 and you applied in September. And herein lies part of the crux of the matter. You're online. You applied in September and you haven't heard from anyone. All of a sudden, someone who applied in December pops off in late December, admitted at Princeton Law, admitted at Westeros Law, name your school. That starts to aggregate. The online community can be your friends in many ways, but in this case, it is not your friend, and it's why waiting has become so difficult for so many people. Keep in mind, I very, very rarely have seen threads in the 20 plus years I've been doing this, now we haven't had message boards for that long, but however many years I've been on message boards from the beginning, back there was lawschooldiscussion.com. Google that, it's dead. That was 10, 15 years ago. I very rarely see threads that start with denied at Harvard, right? So all you're seeing are the limited number of positive data points. Also, it's generally the go-getters who are online. So you're seeing even a skewed population pool who are only reporting their happy moments, understandably. But that starts taking its toll. You're also used to, particularly your generation, I don't know how else to say it. I grew up, when I was a kid, I had a rotary phone. Google that. You'd have to crank the thing up to dial each number. It would take 5 minutes to dial the neighbor next door. You're used to a high degree of responsivity. And in the law school admissions process, and this always comes as a surprise. So next year, the people applying next year, 19 out of 20, probably 49 out of 50 won't know this. You can wait 8 to 9 months before you get a decision. That is shocking to people, particularly people in this generation, particularly when you don't know the admissions process. Okay. So there's a lot of waiting, and I've talked about that, and I've given you some of the reasons, which incidentally have nothing to do with you. It's just how the process works. So I would keep that in mind. I've talked about why it's hard. You're not used to it. You're seeing all the results of a very skewed applicant pool who aren't saying I've been denied. So what can you do about it? And this is the part I hope that if you're going to turn the volume up or replay, what you don't want to ever do is sit around, and I get emails, direct messages, etc., every single night where I know someone is doing this. They're sitting around and they're saying, okay, I'm waiting. I'm not hearing from schools. I'm a go-getter. I'm a proactive person. So certainly there are things I can do that will get me an earlier decision to make me feel better. That's the key right there. Make me feel better. So we have a blog on this. Maybe we can link it from here about some of the ridiculous things people can do. Don't go wait for them outside, admissions officers outside their apartment. True story to our team at Spivey Consulting. Don't wait for them at their car at the parking garage. True story multiple times to me from prospective students. Don't send the admissions office gifts. Okay, I got a shoe once and it said, now that I have my foot in the door, let's talk about my admission. All those people are doing is they're trying to make themselves feel better. They're not, clearly, you understand this, mailing an admissions officer a shoe, sitting on the hood of their car, which was kind of obnoxious to begin with, waiting for them in a dark parking lot, that's worsening your chance of admission. People are doing it just because they're trying to make themselves feel better by getting information in the process. The only information they're getting is online from other people, that skewed group that are sharing their happy results, understandably sharing. So here is your matrix of decision. Is my reaching out to the admissions office an organic, natural reason that is going to increase my chance of admission? Visiting is great. You can even visit twice, but space them out. So if you visit in December, don't visit in January, visit in April. Staying in touch about once, starting in the, January, February time period, once a month, once every 2 months is great. But don't just say, hey, I'm still here, eager for my decision. That always reads the wrong way online. So what I would say is something like, if you get a new job, had something published with a professor, here's a copy of my updated resume. I wanted to highlight the fact that I'm now clerking for this firm and getting wonderful experience. Anything like that. I'm going to be in town on these dates, and I'd love to stop by the admissions office just to introduce myself. I could do so many versions of this. I will blog more about the wait, not just at the Spivey Consulting blog, but on sort of the psychology of it at spiveyblog.com, because the wait very much is challenging to very many high achievers like you all. To the extent that you can walk away from the process, particularly when you're amped up, because I get the amped up emails. It's a Friday night and you're thinking about your application. What can I do? To the extent that you can go out go to a basketball court and shoot baskets, play a video game, read a great book, go for a run. There are going to be moments where your anxiety, applicant system, whatever you want to call it, takes over in this process. The best advice I can give that I've learned, I mean, I'm not a calm person, trust me. I do these podcasts, but when I was in my 20s, I was a revved up, go-getter as well. And one of my best friend's fathers, who's a psychologist, said, when you get into these moments, just walk away and disengage your mind, and that works great. So that's what I want you to do. When you're thinking about how can I make this school want to admit me, you probably can't in that moment. So don't go online. Don't send emails. You can send emails to me, but don't send emails to schools. Those are the moments where go do something. A detachment from the online community, a week off, is wonderful for you because, again, you're only reading about a tiny section of results, and those are making the wait so hard. This was Mike Spivey at the Spivey Consulting Group. I'll probably do a part 2 of this, or I'll blog about it. I feel like I didn't cover nearly as much as I could because I feel the tension rising, and I understand this cycle particularly, it's 2019, 2020, because of the unique July test and the additional tests, is going to be a slow cycle. Come back to this podcast and the part 2 version I'll do when you get worried about the wait. We know it's going to be a slow cycle that has nothing to do with you. I hope this was helpful.